I will start my timer now so that way I make sure not to go over. Okay, so another day, and today's topic is I am Catholic and I love. So I'm bringing this up. I know it's a little controversial sometimes, especially with all the hot stuff that's going on in the news today, in the media, around the world, and like all of the different things that come up with being Christian. But it's something that comes up a lot when I talk, when I express my opinions, when I kind of state my position on some stuff, and it affects how I make decisions. So I figured it'd be something I could share. It's also something that I found is a little bit misunderstood sometimes, especially with people misrepresenting some of the ideals. Now, I'm not saying it's always intentional. It might just be they didn't understand it, or they get a different understanding of it from when they were taught, or how they understand things, and a lot of other factors that come into play. But this is just kind of how I've always understood it. So, I have been Catholic for many, many years now. I can remember ever since I was little, me and my family would get up on Sunday mornings, get all dressed up, and we would go to church. So when I was really little, I remember we used to go to the Basilica, which is the national shrine in San Juan. And we would go there, we would say a few prayers in their little prayer candle room, and then we would go to eat, or we would go home. Following that, I remember my grandmother started taking me to the Ash Wednesday Mass, which is the start of the Lenten season for Catholics. And I loved going with her, and we would always go in the afternoon. Well, one day she went without me. She went early in the morning, and so when I got home from school, I was like, hey, when is Grandma coming to pick me up? And my parents were like, well, I think she already went, so she's not going. So they decided to take me to the church that was in town, and we just started going. Now, we all kind of have a different recollection, so if you ask my parents, I might give you a different story, but that's what I remember. And ever since then, we were going to Sunday school, we were getting all of our sacraments, we went to Mass every Sunday, and I remember at some point my dad kind of pulled me to the edge of the pew where he used to sit and to show me some of the people that were up on the altar helping the priest out during the Mass. And you see them? He's like, they're altar servers. They go up and they help prepare everything. They hold the book for the priest. They help set up what the table has, or the altar has, whenever different parts of the Mass are going on, whether that's presenting the book or preparing the Eucharist. And I thought that was fascinating, so my dad took me to their first meeting where they kind of get together and train, talk, set up our schedule. It's changed a little over the years, but that was what was going on at the time. And I became an altar server. And it was a lot of fun for me. I really enjoyed it. I got really good at it, or at least I think I got really good at it. And that was the first way I started serving in church. And then as I got older, I was a Eucharistic minister, I was a lector, I became a CCD teacher, which is one of the things that I absolutely love and kind of miss about living back home. I helped kind of learn to be a sacristan, and I really enjoyed doing all of that. And it was something that I was always really proud of. It was one of the few places I felt like I had a community of people who I could just kind of go and be myself. And then there have been some ups and downs with it, different kinds of people I've had interactions with, different kinds of friendships I've developed and lost over the years. But I've always felt very strongly about my faith. Now, I understand that there are a lot of hot topics that are going outside in the world, like abortions, divorces, all of the LGBTQ things that are going on, and we get a really bad rep for a lot of that. I know that there was recently, not a few months ago, there was the list that was released of a list of priests who hadn't been following the rules or what they were supposed to be and called to do, and the names were released, and that was a really hard time for the church. And because of a lot of these kinds of things and how certain people tend to react to them, we've gotten a bad rep a little recently. And I just kind of want to explain my personal faith, because I feel very strongly about it, and I feel like I've been misrepresented. So, kind of starting on the first one of these, is one of the biggest things that comes up is abortion. Now, before I start getting into all of my technicalities on this, I'm not a spokesperson for the faith. I might even be wrong in some senses, but this is how I've understood it. If you have any questions, please don't ask me. Ask either a priest or a doctor of the faith or somebody in the church that has a little more education in this than I do. Now, back to the topic. So, the way I've always felt about it is that conception is the beginning of life, because if you think about it, whenever you're trying to have kids, the moment you know you're pregnant. You have a baby, you're going to be a mom. And for a lot of women who lose their pregnancies early on, it's still as devastating as losing a child. So to me, it seemed pretty clear that that's when life starts. Now, I can understand there are a lot of situations that come up that make it really difficult, such as, rape, or, that's really the biggest one. But a lot of different situations that can come up that cause you to kind of question that, because it would be a little bit easier if you couldn't think of it as a child. However, you can't just pick and choose based on what best serves your situation. Like 1 + 1 always equals 2. You can't, change it up a little bit so that way it suits your needs. But I've always been of the opinion that that's when life starts. Now, there are a lot of other things that come before that I also have very strong opinions on that I think would prevent it. So, as much as I am pro-life and I'm against abortions, I'm also for a lot of things that people also contradict sometimes. So, one of the big ones is I understand medical needs. So, if mom's sick or baby's not alive anymore, like the heartbeat is lost and a lot of those kinds of things, I feel like that's a little bit more of a medical decision, and especially if baby's not there anymore, then you're gonna get sick for nothing. And I understand it's a really sensitive topic and it's really personal, and it's something that me and my husband have talked about. What happens if my life's in danger when I'm pregnant, and a lot of that, and I think that's really, really personal, and that's a different sort of thing. The kinds of things that I talk about are more along the lines of, I did what I wanted and I got pregnant, and I'm not really ready to be a mom, or I wasn't very careful or safe, or I don't have the money for it, kind of stuff. I'm a little less understanding of that, because we've always known that sex leads to kids. That's kind of what it's for. I understand there's also a more personal aspect, like a love connection and that physical pleasure, but that's still how babies are made. There's no other way, aside from like science and all of that sort of thing, but that's still how you would naturally conceive a child. So if you're doing it just for fun, I mean, that's your prerogative, but at the same time, you have to accept the consequences of your action. Along with that, I also believe that people should be educated. The same way that we get taught how to take a bath and brush our hair and brush our teeth, we should be educated on how to make sure that we're okay in our health, all of it, including our genitalia and all of the sex education, including contraceptions, going to the doctor, which is a really big one, and taking care of yourself. There's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. And more importantly, kind of understanding that whoever you are, however you believe, it's still a big step, because you have to accept, and it's something that me and my husband have agreed with, if you ever sleep with somebody, there's always going to be some sort of chance that you're going to get pregnant. I've heard all of the stories, and I know people who've said, I took the Plan B and I still got pregnant, or I was on contraception and we still got pregnant. I used all of the stuff that we were supposed to and we still got pregnant. That is always a chance. Yes, it reduces your chances, but it's still there, so you need to be taught that no matter what you do, there's always that chance, and you have to make sure that you're being responsible with that. That's just kind of one of the things I've always believed. And I know that sex ed in school is one of those big hot topics that people are always saying, I don't want my kids to learn about that in school, or I don't think that children should be taught this. No, but, you can do it in stages. I remember when I was younger, my mom gave my sisters the talk, And she opened a book that was like the anatomy book and was kind of like, ask me questions, I'm going to teach you a little bit. And when I was around 12, 13, and you start your period around that age if you're a woman, my mom gave me a book on women's health. And so I just read through it, and it kind of taught me a lot of the things that I needed to know, a lot of stuff that my body's going to go through and all of that. I don't see why you can't teach it in school. It's some of like the basic stuff, I understand teenagers are going to be funny and weird about it, and they're going to laugh, and they're going to say all of the jokes, and everybody likes to make fun of all of the pictures because it makes us all a little uncomfortable, but it's still important to learn. Oh, sorry, my phone is getting a call. You still have to learn to take care of yourself. Now, I understand that everybody's going to have a different opinion, but that's just kind of how I've stood on it. And on top of it, if it reduces the abortion rates, that would be a kind of big benefit there. On top of that, we also have to help women who are already pregnant a little bit more. So it's a really big stressor, and it's a really big thing that happens going on, and there's nothing to do by that point, especially if you don't want them to get an abortion. They're going to have a kid. If they can't do it, or they're not able to, and they want to give it up for adoption, it's a really scary thing because our foster system isn't the best. I wish that were any other way, and it might be better than other places, but it's still not great. I know this because I've heard kind of some of the stuff that my husband went through. I've heard some of the stuff that friends go through, or parents that are trying to get kids and they're having to jump through all of these hoops, and the horror stories of kids getting adopted by parents who just kind of want the money. And there are so many things that are wrong with it. The kids that age out that never got taught how to be an adult, who never get taught the basics of finances, how to take care of yourself. They don't have that support system. I know when I was in college, I had my parents there to help me. They would help make sure that I had lunch money when I went to college. They made sure I had gas money. They made sure I had a roof over my head. If I was running behind on rent for whatever reason, usually because I was being a little irresponsible, they helped me out. And that made a big difference for me because it meant that I didn't have to stoop to certain levels to make sure I had enough money. And that was because I had parents and I still messed up. But they were there to support me, make sure I wasn't getting into bigger trouble than I could handle. And if I was in trouble, they would help me. A lot of kids in foster care who age out don't have that. Now, there are a lot of programs that are helping out with this. People are being mentors to these kids to help them kind of figure out what's on in life, figure out what they're doing, try to help them out. But that's still not enough a lot of times. So that's another thing. We have to make that a better system, because if I couldn't have raised a kid and I had gotten pregnant, I would be absolutely terrified to put them in the foster system, because a lot of what I've heard, it's kind of setting them up for failure. Now, they could get adopted, they could find a wonderful family, but that's a lot of maybes. So that's another thing. And there's a lot more factors in that. Parents that don't know what to do, parents that don't make enough money or can't work a full-time job while also taking care of their children or affording all of the basic stuff at home, on top of that childcare, because it's also very expensive. And there's a lot of factors that go into this that I feel like we also need to talk about when you talk about abortion. Because I've read all of the stories, I try to keep up, I'm always trying to be really sensitive if somebody brings it up. There's never just one thing. It's never just, I'm going to do it because I got pregnant and it's an accident and that's my backup plan. That's not usually what the story is. Now, I'm sure there's at least one person out there who that was their excuse, but there's a lot of other situations that we don't take into consideration. We just assume that they were being reckless or careless, and that's not always the case. They might not have had access to healthcare. They might not have had access to the basic knowledge of how things work and how to prevent it or how to take care of themselves, or they don't know any other way. If we try to fix a problem before it's a problem, it tends to help out a lot. So that's one issue. Next issue. I mentioned the LGBTQ with all of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, all of that. that's another hot topic. Part of that is because there's a lot of things that people will read in the Bible, or there's disagreements on whether or not it's okay. I don't really have too big of a strong feeling on it, kind of on either side. My biggest thing has always been love. There are so many other things in the world that are going on. There are shootings that are going on in schools. There are rape. There is all of this negative things going on, all of this violence, all of this hatred. I don't see why we need to aim it at another group. These are, a lot of the times, they're just people who just want to live their lives, and this is what makes them happy. I don't really see why we need to make life that much more difficult for them. If they want to come talk to me personally and kind of get my opinion on it, I will personally tell them I don't really know, because it's not a topic that I've really researched. But if you want to be my friend, I want to be your friend too. If you want just to go out to dinner and feel like you're not being judged all the time, I would love to go with you. I just don't see it as a really big issue that we need to go and bang on their doors and hate on them or hurt them or tear them down. They want to love another person. And I don't really see how it's a big deal. That's just kind of always been my take on it. If you have a different take or you understand it better than I do, please, I would love to sit down and get more education on it. In my opinion, education is always the way to go when you're not sure on a topic or something is making you uncomfortable. Learn more about it. If it's like a very black and white issue, like killing somebody, there's really not too much to learn about it, and I kind of have my don't do that because it's not loving somebody. But if it's something more complicated like this, go learn about it. And don't just use one method of learning. Don't just go to one person and get all of their information and assume that's gospel. It's try to learn from multiple people. Learn from somebody who's in the community, maybe what they're going through, why they feel so passionately about things. Go to somebody who's opposed to them to kind of get their opinions on it and what they think and why they feel so strongly of their beliefs. Go to multiple sources and really go into depth into the issue before you make snap judgments. Putting that one aside. The next one is, I've noticed a lot of people trying to judge. Trying to assume that one group is better than another, that we have a right to that, and I really don't think we do, because we don't know the whole story. When I read through the Bible, I have always read the stories of love one another and tend to yourself before you tend to somebody else. So if I want to help somebody else out or tell them, let's get you on the right track, I have to make sure that I'm on the right track first. That has been one of the biggest things that I've always tried to take away from that. If I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, how am I supposed to tell somebody else? I've also learned that being a good example is better than going out and trying to change everybody by yelling in their faces or trying to tell them, oh, you're wrong, let's help get you right. Because that has a stronger influence than if you're yelling at people. I've always tried to be the example. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I am far from it. That's my prayer every Sunday. I say, please just help me be whatever you need me to be today, or this week, or during this difficult time. Help me to find some understanding. Help me to find that little drop of patience that I need on top of everything else to make sure that I'm doing what you want. Because one of the biggest lessons is to love God and to love your neighbor. Because if you love your neighbor, you're not going to want to wish ill on them. You're going to want their success. If they hurt you, you don't want to have them judged or to understand suddenly. You're going to want them to grow and to be better, and so that hopefully the next person they come across, they won't hurt them. If maybe they did it because they're going through a difficult time, that they get over it and realize their own mistakes and let them deal with it. If somebody hurt you, ask God to help you heal before you ask Him to fix somebody else. Because a lot of the times, the biggest thing that hurts you when somebody else is trying to hurt you is your own frustration, anger, and that need to get even. That is what eats at you more than what they did a lot of times. And I struggle with that, especially right now with everything that I went through this last month and still kind of processing and going through and trying to get over and learn from. I'm trying to let it go and to be better from it. I'm trying to learn to let go of the anger and the frustration and that need to get even, and to move on and to forgive them. And that's hard. But that's ultimately what I have always believed that Catholicism is. Being love. And I'm not just talking romantic love, I'm talking the love of a mother and a child, the love of two friends, the love of siblings, the love of family, the love that puts somebody else before yourself, the love that keeps you from saying the mean things, the love that gives you that motivation to just, you have some extra food, give it to that person that you know is hungry, or to buy your friend a meal when you know they're struggling, and it might make or break them if they buy food to hang out with you. That love that teaches us to take care of each other, because ultimately that's how we become better people. Hopefully that helped some of you understand a little bit more about me and my faith, and thanks for listening.